Hi, my name is Preston Sear. I run a website called portageur.ca. I'm very, very happy to be invited to be at Canoecopia, even if it's virtual. Um, so glad to be back. um, Today I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, my dog Nancy, Nancy the Canoe Dog. I've done a few presentations on canoeing with your dog in the past, and this is going to supplement some of the information that we've talked about previously, if you've ever been to one of my presentations. But it's a lot of little stories about Nancy, and somewhere along the lines there's going to be some little bits about getting your canoe dog ready to get out there and join you on your adventures. Of course, Nancy is a particularly interesting dog. She was born in New Orleans shortly before or after Hurricane Katrina. The way we figure it is she's about 17 years old. So I thought maybe this year I'd start talking about how she's kind of technically a senior dog, even though if you've never ever met her, you probably wouldn't think so. This is her when I first got her. And at the time, she weighed about 13 pounds. She had heartworms. She had just given birth. She wasn't extremely healthy. These are her papers. Her original name was Billie Jean, which I did not like. So I changed it to Nancy. Pretty good practice if you ever adopt a dog. That way you remove any connotations with their old name. Could be true, could be not, but it's a fresh start, right? This is our first walk together, and you could tell she was pretty skinny, very friendly, had some spirit. She got to meet my dog Norm as well. They got along, so I decided, because she was so sweet, she was going to come home with me. And of course, she fit right in. She got very comfortable right away, and we started to become best buds. And just after living in a nice, loving home, getting proper nutrition, she turned very healthy very quickly. And we started to find out she was actually quite athletic. She would run around, she'd jump fences. That's another story. And I figured that I should get her out. I should get her out in the canoe. And the two of us have been camping ever since. And of course, portaging is the activity of choice for the two of us. It's great for me because I get to paddle around and see great stuff. It's great for her because she loves the portages, running up and down the trails. So we make a pretty good team, I'd say. We also do a lot of outdoor advocacy where we're trying to inspire people to get outdoors, which is kind of what I'm trying to do here. And she took to it very well. She's a great little representative. People like following her adventures. Of course, we camp a lot. I've got a whole little system set up for her, and we've adapted it, and it's evolved a little over the years too. Now that she is getting a little older, I'll talk about that a little later, but the cold, the heat has to be managed a little bit more than when she was a young pup. And currently I found a sleeping bag of mine that had a hood that I didn't like, and you could take it off and it just fits right around her. So on particularly cold nights, I make sure that she has her dog mat, and then that sleeping bag is actually just a sleeping bag hood, and it fits her perfect. It's perfect size for her. Of course, you also want to make sure that they're comfortable in the canoe, because sometimes the canoe isn't super comfy. What I tend to do is I'll make sure that at least one of the packs is a little padded down. If I'm in a tandem canoe, she tends to just lie on top of the packs, and I'll put the padded side up, and she is perfectly fine in there. Your dog might not like that as much as Nancy. They might want to sit on the bottom of the canoe. So you just want to make sure that you get some padding down there so they're nice and comfy, because they're sitting in the canoe for a while, and you want to make sure that they have the patience to last the whole trip, right? And make it an enjoyable experience. Speaking of which, not everything's enjoyable. She doesn't love everything out there. And things are going to go wrong. A few years back, she tore her knee up. What some people like in the human world might be an MCL or ACL, I can't remember, but the ligaments in her leg had to be surgically repaired, which was quite a big thing. Not even months later, after she recovered from that, she cut her paw, had to go back into the hospital. So another tip I might, it's not so much a tip as an FYI, is with older dogs, they're going to be more expensive, especially if they need medication. But Nancy's pretty unusual in the sense that she's been able to bounce back from all of these ailments, and you would never know it. She is an athletic dog, very athletic dog, and the two of us have been adventuring in between ailments and that kind of thing, and it really hasn't phased her. We travel around a lot. Another thing that you want to do is condition your dogs to get into all kinds of different environments. And obviously she's prepared. She's been in cars before. She's prepared for the car. I got her used to being in a canoe really quickly by not making it a big deal. But we've gone on buses as well, which was quite an experience. They're loud, rumbly, with a little bit of patience and stuff. She was fine. We've been on motorboats, which is kind of funny because she seemed to like them at first and thought like the wind flowing through her hair, so to speak, was pretty neat. But once we started getting going and it started getting a little loud, she didn't like them at all. We've been on a couple of motorboats here and there. She's not a fan. I try to make those experiences as short as possible. But of course, Killarney Outfitters has this fancy water taxi, which was great. We took that a couple of years ago, and it's a big boat, so there's lots of places to hang out, including these little couches. So she was perfectly happy in that boat, no problem at all. Incidentally, I do always always put her in a life jacket when we're out on the water, and for the same reason a human needs a life jacket. You know, we're not all great swimmers. Usually, when something happens, you're not really prepared for it. And of course, the bonus is I can lift her up and put her in the canoe or in the water taxi in this case. She doesn't love it, but you know, it makes things a lot easier. This year, though, we got to go on a plane, which again, Nancy was okay with, but after a certain point, she was like, I'm done with this. And you could tell one of the things that you and your dog will get to know is each other's tells and when we're uncomfortable. And a lot of people will look at this photo and think, oh, she's smiling, but she's actually a little uncomfortable. That's why the mouth's open and the panting. So it was a 20-minute plane ride. It was all good, and she was great on the way back. Because we do so much traveling, I was trying to think of how many hotels she's actually stayed in. Quite a few now, and she's pretty used to the different routine. You know, at home we have a routine, but at the hotel we have a whole new routine, and there's new beds and stuff like that. The only thing that I would warn you is there's usually a pet fee, and if they mess things up, they'll send you another one. So when it makes sense to do so, I also bring in her camping pad, so she's not messing up the comforters and that. But of course, her main job is she's a model, and this is her trying to sell avocados. Little spec work, didn't take. And she's really good at it. For some reason, she just knows how to pose, and she seems to pose at the right time. I didn't teach her that, but it makes for great photography. Oh, yeah, and I should mention she is getting older. And so there's certain personality traits that have like come to light. Some are just exaggerated from before, others are brand new. A lot of dogs get grumpier as they get older. She seems to have gotten sweeter. She was a little grumpy and, you know, aggressive as a youth, but and what's funny is in this picture, she's not actually being grumpy. She's barking at a moose that she's gotten used to seeing these animals, and so she gets all upset about. But one thing about senior dogs is you're going to have to really pay attention to their senses and whether or not they've lost anything. Because in this case, I think her eyes are going a little bit because that wasn't really a real moose, just as it wasn't a real bear at the portage store, or when we go to the Algonquin Outfitters as well. There's a bear, a wooden bear there as well. She gets upset. She has to get up there and sniff them before she knows that they're not real. Yes, and speaking of getting older, she's had quite a lot of birthdays, which is a lot of fun for me because I get to take these goofy, fun photos. Please don't judge me too much. And this, I was going through this the other day, and there's a lot of them. And every one of these parties, like she's 17 now, so every one of these parties, there's new guests, new friends that come in. There's usually a new like kind of theme. There's always a cake, and you could tell she loves it. And we just have a lot of fun with it. And they like it because the cake that I make is like out of meat and cheese and whipped cream and all her favorites. Oh, but of course, the I don't know how I'm going to top this, but for her sweet 16, we found her a prom dress, which seemed appropriate. And it's kind of weird that I have to admit that I'm the type of guy who orders a prom dress for his dog, but you know, it is what it is, right? But I thought it was fantastic. It was a lot of fun. We had her friend Tucker over, had a little cake that they made, and of course the photo shoots were a lot of fun. She was really great in that. Of course, this is my favorite photo because this is her seeing another dog, and I always imagine her just like getting so angry at this other dog, seeing her in this dress. So Christmas, also a great time to take these photos, and we've spent a lot of Christmases together, from the goofy store-bought to custom-made socks, matching. I can't even believe I'm saying this out loud, but like matching outfits, Santa hats with her friends, and a couple years ago we got matching elf pajamas. And if you think that was bad, I found reindeer pajamas this year, and as you can tell, she loves it. She absolutely loves it. That is to say, she tolerates it, and she's very patient, and she's used to us doing these goofy things. Always, like the pajamas that they make nowadays are fantastic. You can find ones that match with your dog, or you can just find ones that match together. We've had a lot of fun, even if it's a little humiliating for her. She knows she's getting lots of attention, so that's fun. Now, you know, I've noticed that Nancy, I mentioned, not a lot of people will notice that Nancy is getting a little older, but I have. And there's you know, there's tells. She's a white dog, so you don't really see her gray hair, but I've noticed it. And of course, she's getting those lumps, as you can see on her chest. They're perfectly fine. They don't cause her any pain. But it is a reminder that she is a senior dog, as much as she wouldn't admit it, and as much as I don't want to admit it either. But it has not slowed her down, and we've barely had to adjust. There are certain things that we've had to adjust, but for the most part, we are out there. We are doing stuff. She's having lots of fun. Even if she's not jumping over those big rocks that she used to, she's still crawling and over them or under them, or and exploring, and her enthusiasm for being out there has not waned one bit. And yeah, she's a pretty dog even at her age. So we're going to continue to do that, but of course we have to figure out how to keep doing it safely at her age, and as she ages more, make adjustments to how we do things to make sure that she's always safe, happy, comfortable. Now, these are standard safety tips that I normally talk about for any dog, right? So you want to bring first aid, and it can be your human first aid. You don't have to necessarily go out and buy a special dog first aid kit, but you do, that would help. Nothing wrong with that. But you do want to make sure there's extra aspirin, right? That's an anti-inflammatory. You want Benadryl, you know, in case they get stung by a bee or too many mosquitoes, that kind of thing. Wounds, same kind of thing as humans, but you really want to make sure you either get that pet tape or even electric tape, and tie it over the wounds, because they're going to go after it. They're going to pull them off. It's going to be messy. That'll help that. Learn human first aid, right? It's very similar. The same kind of things apply, right? But you want to emphasize immobilization and covering wounds, and of course, getting them out of the woods, like to a vet as soon as possible, right? I've mentioned in the past about hydrogen peroxide. It's like 1 to 2 tablespoons per 30 pounds. So Nancy's about 30 pounds, so that would be for her. And it's also a good skunk remedy. And a little tidbit I learned before, because it's liquid. Skunk remedy, sorry, getting the smell out of it, not to keep them away. But generally, you take an eyedropper. I bought a little eyedropper. It's now in the pack. And you can just dispense it by just dropping it into their mouths, and that will induce the vomiting. This is in particular important to people who have dogs who will eat everything or anything, which is a big deal. Also, just Pepto-Bismol, some Pepsid. You really have to tone down the quantities, right? Break them in half, pour out only so much and all that. But this will help get the stomach back to where it needs to be, especially if they're very uncomfortable, very gassy, and that kind of thing. But in all cases, like, know when to go home. Like, when things are bad, go home. And I like to always remind people to try to be aware of the closest vet. And ideally, you do that before you leave. But oftentimes, as you're driving, you'll notice vets that might not be on the internet, or they're local, and just kind of mentally note, okay, as I pass, there's the vet. That's where I got to go. Of course, for senior dogs, my face is in the way of the graphic. Sorry about that. But this is for senior dogs, some consideration for senior dogs. So you want to bring medication along, because senior dogs are definitely going to have medication and medication needs, right? And you want to kind of schedule your trip around those medications as well. The last thing you want to do is have everything really packed away and be out on the lake and planning to paddle for like the next 4 hours, knowing that, Nancy's got to take her pill at noon. Oops, those types of things. So you want to make sure that they can get their pills at their schedule. Obviously, you're going to have to go a little slower. That's the sad part. For some of us, that's not a big deal, because we're getting slower. Not running around like we're 19 anymore anyway, but, really consider your dog and the pace that they're setting, and be aware of it. And be prepared for them to be more tired than normal, right? It used to be they could run around all day, sleep overnight, and they were fine. They might have to go to bed a little earlier. They might have to sleep in. And of course, that leads me to rest, right? Not only at the end of the day, allow them to rest, but also in between trips as well. Like, they might be perfectly fine for a weekend, but then the next weekend it'll catch up to them, right? And check with your vet regularly. Especially if your dog has like kind of a heart condition or something like that, you want to make sure that your dog's healthy enough to get out there and be as active as you're being. So a regular checkup, check in with your vet. Pay special attention to temperatures, because as dogs get older, extreme colds and extreme heat is really going to bother them a lot more than when they were younger. So it might mean, getting to camp a little earlier to avoid the cold, maybe taking rests in the middle of the day, swim breaks, those types of things, right? Yeah, and that's the other thing. Keep in mind the loss of senses. I've already kind of touched on it, but Nancy's starting to lose her hearing. She's starting to lose her sight. I think her sight's fine, but it's not 100%. And so things that you were doing before, getting your dog to come back to you, for example. You know, I do a whistle to get her back, and she can hear that. And I'm hoping we'll never get to the point where she can't hear that coming back. But I have tried to call her from a far distance away, and she hasn't heard me, or maybe she has, and she's just not going to come. But you know, that could obviously be a big deal, especially if there's other animals and stuff. Where was I? Oh yeah, backup plan for carrying the dogs out. You know, if they are older and they're going to be more prone to injury, might have to carry this dog out. Bringing extra slings, figuring out how to carry a dog would be very beneficial. And I mean, like everything else, just keep alert of their behavior. You know, if they're not running as much, maybe it's because they can't. You know, and you know your dog, so just try to be observant. Try not to be overly optimistic or pessimistic, and just observe how much fun are they really having. Because there's no reason not to bring them out. And Nancy, of course, at 17, is super healthy. She's still running around. We're still going out there. This is an interesting part, though. There are some advantages to getting older. For example, Nancy used to be really afraid of the thunder. And in this case, this video is us in a tent in a big, big thunderstorm. And you can tell that she's a little uncomfortable. She doesn't know what's going on. The rain's coming down on us pretty badly. And then I went outside because I had to fix a patch. But you could see there was lightning. There were thunder. It was coming right over top of us. And normally that means that's it for the night. I'm hanging out with Nancy, who's shaking and you know, upset at this whole thing, and that's my whole night. We're not sleeping. But by the time I got back into the tent, she was perfectly fine. And I think, which is unusual, I think it's because, you know, she couldn't quite hear the thunderstorm like she once did. So I mean, it's not all bad. Oh, and of course, 2020. Let's talk about 2020. Let's talk about COVID. We couldn't get out, just like I'm sure all of you, we couldn't get out as much as we could. So what we had to do a lot of last year, as far as highlights for last year, was staying in the bed, taking photos in the bed, sometimes with our friends, sometimes alone. And I mean, that's kind of what we were doing. We're sheltering in place, but we're still trying to have a little fun. We're out there taking some hikes and going on trips when we can and that kind of thing. But a lot of my photos from this year are her lying in bed. And there's only so many that you can take for them to be kind of original. So sometimes I move to the couch. She's just as cute on the couch. And as you can tell, it's, you know, this COVID thing, you know, we're trying to get past it so that we can get back out there and get this old dog running those portage trails again. Because yeah, she's getting a little bored and a little stir crazy. So, you know, we'll get back out there, Nancy, soon enough. But one of the highlights of this year was we happened to be invited to Cabin Falls in Temagami to stay with the legendary Hap and Andrea Wilson in their remote cottage. It was quite fancy. Nancy loved it. She took over that cabin. She loved the extra luxury of being out in the woods in the middle of nowhere, and yet fancy meals, fancy beds, fireplaces, you know, that kind of thing. But we were still surrounded by so much rugged nature. And this place is amazing because it's just right inside all these rocks, and everywhere around is just amazingly beautiful, and waterfalls everywhere. Everywhere you go, go on any hike in any direction, and you're going to find a waterfall. And we did. That's exactly what we did. We got into the canoe one way one day, another day the next. You know, it was a lot of fun. It was particularly fun for Nancy because she found a new boyfriend. This is Oben on his first discovery of Nancy, and would not leave her alone. Just was obsessed with her. It was hilarious. And, if you think like Nancy was constantly running away, but at the same time, like when he got distracted, she was right back over at Oben's place to make sure that she could tell him that, she wasn't interested. Which reminds me of her previous camp boyfriend. It was the same types of behaviors. This is also into monogamy. Must be something about that. She just loved playing with in this case Amek, and they had lots of fun. And just like both times, unfortunately, it had to end at some point. So I'm sure there was some doggy heartbreak when we had to leave. But yeah, very very similar. A nice story. So, what does Nancy eat? I've got this handsome gentleman here who's going to tell us all about it. So, what does Nancy eat? Well, she also takes advantage of dehydrated food. Now, generally speaking, I buy it. I forget now the other brand that I buy a lot, but this is Stella and Chewy's. And it's basically just meat that's freeze dried. And I buy this stuff because it's got a lot less preservatives than some of the other ones. But they come out as these little discs. And you can add water, but Nancy likes them just the way they are. Again, the same advantages to dehydrated food or freeze-dried food is it's lighter, it won't go bad, and it's nice and compact. So Nancy's supposed to get about 4 of these for dinner. But that isn't to say I don't also dehydrate for her as well. And you'll remember from the preparation videos that I made some very stinky, hard liver. This is beef liver. I ran that through the dehydrator. I warn you though, it's going to stink. So put that in a room you're not planning on being around. Now, this stuff has kind of crumbled, but this is dehydrated chicken. And what I've done with it is, I bought one of those chickens, a whole chicken. Here comes Nancy, she smells it. So I bought a whole chicken, and when I was pretty much done with it, go ahead, it's okay. Here. When I was done with it, I just boiled it up until it got to the point where I could throw it through the blender. You don't want it? You're not hungry? And it just became a big, gross chicken mush. And then I dehydrated it, and it now is these chips. So it's kind of the same as the Stella and Chewy's. So I'll show you how she probably smelled. She came over here because she smelled the liver. So, I mean, as far as which one she prefers, we know that. You're not like a dirty. Smart. Yeah, this comes off very rubbery and very brittle at the same time. So yeah. Now, the problem with Nancy is that she is very picky. And for some reason, while we're out here, she doesn't want to eat her kibble. And that's actually why I switched to this. It was more about getting her to eat something that she'll actually like. Because this stuff's kind of expensive too, right? But she'll eat it out here, and I don't have to worry about her. And like I said, you can, generally I just kind of crumble it up so that she can, like in chunks, so that she can, grab pieces of it. But some people will add water and it'll take the consistency of like oatmeal or whatever. It also stinks. You can see she eats that up. And the other side note to all this is that you want to make sure that you clean up after this, because obviously if Nancy likes it, so do other critters, right? So they're going to smell this. They're going to want some of this food. So Ziploc bags, put it up the tree, bear barrel or bear vault, rather, not the bear barrel. because this would be probably even more. They'd want this stuff way more than they'd want life. They're getting bitten. I think it's going to rain. Can you, girl? Yeah, eat it up. But yeah, the kibble's also heavy. And Nancy, funny thing about Nancy not eating her kibble is she gets so picky. She's not eating kibble. I pour it out. I got to put it back in the bag to make sure that there's no scents around camp. So now I'm cleaning little bits of kibble that she didn't eat, checking them all around. Plus, it's all heavy, so I'm carrying it back over the portage. So this is the stuff. She'll eat it. She'll clean it all good, and it's light. So even if I do have to bring this over the back over the portage, it's not that big a deal. So there you go. Tips on feeding your dog. And the other thing about it is that I'm pretty sure that the reason why she is in the shape that she's at and living to the life to the age that she's at is because we've constantly made sure that she's eating really, really good food. She's healthy. She's very healthy. And I'm hoping for a really long life. Now, of course, she doesn't always eat just nothing or like nothing bad. Everything's super nutritious. I give her like a cheese almost every day now. But I try as much as I can. She'll tell you the secret to her long life is her spa days. She likes to get dirty. And everywhere we go, she'll find an excuse to roll in something. She likes the smells. She likes, it's a dog thing. I don't really get it. It's gross. But if there's something to roll in, she's going to find it. And unfortunately, unfortunately, a lot of the time she has this bad habit of rolling in poop, which is like beyond gross and just so inconvenient because you basically have to stop everything you're doing to go clean Nancy. And I used to do, when I do the extended version of this presentation, there's another photo that looks almost identical because I had cleaned her up. She ran back into the woods and I had to clean her up again. I don't know what it is. She just likes it. Unfortunately, the worst time was this time I went out with Kevin Callan. It was my first, a chance to hang out with him, and him and his daughter. We went on a trip, and we're having a great time. But at 11 o'clock at night, all Kevin could hear was, "Oh my God, Nancy, why would you do that? Oh, that's disgusting," because she had just rolled in poop. So and it was like 11 o'clock at night. So I'm splashing in the water, trying to clean her in the dark with a headlamp. It was embarrassing, but she knows when to do that kind of stuff. She also kind of stole his gear. So, make yourself at home. Sure. Whatever. He's invited me out since, so it's not that big a deal. But she's a character, and that's Nancy, and your dog's a character too, and they're going to be exactly who they're going to be, and that's why we love them. And that's kind of the whole point of this whole thing is to just, get them some exercise, get them some fresh air, expose them to fun things, and keep them healthy, and they're going to help us do the same. And on that note, here's a little highlight video I put together of Nancy and our adventures basically over the last few years. Nancy, time to go home now? Are you dirty enough?
Yeah, good girl.
That's nice. So that's Nancy. I hope this has been a little bit informative about how to take your dog on adventures, as well as taking care of a senior dog with as much character as that. If you've been following along with Nancy and I over the years, I hope that was a good update on her adventures, but there's lots more to come. And while this is the end of the presentation for today, check us out at portageur.ca or Facebook, because got lots of stuff to share, lots of things going on, and you know, a lot more fun with Nancy and a lot more cute photos. So with that, I'll say thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of Canoecopia.